On today's show, redrafting the top 10 of the 2019 NHL draft class, and Derek Neumeier from McKeen's Hockey comes on to discuss the WHL's pool of talent. All coming up on Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, I break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash. I'm a scout and prospect analyst across multiple platforms, including this one, and I've got a good one for you today. First off, I'm going to be going back to the 2019 NHL Draft and redrafting the top 10 for you with explanations and analysis on, why I would take this prospect ahead of that one. And sort of each of those picks in order within the top 10 with honorable mentions as well. And then we've got another special guest in this episode and the next, McKeen's Hockey's Assistant Director of Scouting and Senior West Regional Scout, Derek Neumeier, will be coming on to discuss prospects with us. I wanted to dedicate a couple episodes to the WHL's deep pool of talent, and I can't really think of a better scout to talk about the WHL with than Derek. But before we get into any of that, just make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube and to follow along on your favorite podcasting platforms and make us your first listen of the day. It's always much appreciated. So let's get right into it. I wanted to start with my honorable mentions, and to be honest, this was a very tough exercise at the bottom end of this top 10. The three honorable mentions I'm going to mention were very close to cracking the top 10, but I opted for different players for reasons I'm going to explain in just a sec. So in terms of my honorable mentions, I've got Spencer Knight, who went 13th overall to the Florida Panthers. He was just outside of my top 10. Kirby Dach went third overall to the Chicago Blackhawks. And Shane Pinto, who was outside of the top 20 entirely and went to the Ottawa Senators. So those are my three honorable mentions. And again, they were really close to my 10th overall pick in the 2019 draft, but instead I opted for Philip Tomasino, the 24th overall pick of the 2019 draft, makes his way into the top 10. He was a pick of the Nashville Predators. And to me, he's shown all the different elements that I like to see from a center. He carries the puck in transition extremely well. He's got a decently big body with physical attributes that should help him fend off checkers and make his way through defenses easily. Him and Shane Pinto share a lot of attributes. I just think that Tomasino's playmaking game is higher end than Pinto's. Pinto's definitely has a better shot. But for me, what you're looking for from your center is to connect plays from wingers to defenders and vice versa. So in that sense, I see Tomasino as a more projectable center than Pinto, even though Pinto has more than enough attributes in that sense. And I feel like Tomasino's game is, especially physically, is a lot more projectable than Kirby Dach's. Dach does tend to struggle in board battles still. I've watched a lot of his games for the Habs, and there are some improvements. Definitely, he's sort of shown signs of being a special player, but for me, Tomasino just edges him out. So that's my 10th overall pick. At 9th overall, I've got the 16th overall pick of the 2019 draft from the Colorado Avalanche, and that's Alex Newhook. Newhook, to me, has just grown with each year, and he was already someone I was really high in his draft year. I had him in my top 10 heading into the draft, and the fact that he slipped to 16 was pretty surprising to me. He has a lot of very decent attributes. He's got intensity, he's got pace, he plays with a lot of energy. He can do a bit of everything. Great shot, great playmaking. He's just a very well-rounded and versatile forward with one or two really high-end attributes that should help him become a very decent top six contributor on a team as good as the Avalanche. So I've been extremely impressed with Alex Newhook, and he should continue to develop his game and earn opportunities down the line. Right now, he's not getting all the chances that he could with the amount of talent that's on the Avalanche, but as soon as that core ages out, I mean, Alex Newhook is next in line to be a top-line player for me. He's really that good, that energetic, that tremendous of a skater. I mean, he's got so many attributes that you just, one of them's bound to hit and hit majorly. So I'm betting on Newhook's upside here at ninth overall. If I'm selecting in that range, regardless of the team he's on, you always need centers like him on your team. So yeah, he cracks the top 10 as well. My 8th overall pick, just edging out Alex Newhook, is the 7th overall pick of the 2019 draft from the Buffalo Sabres, and that's Dylan Cousins. So Cousins to me has sort of more or less stagnated, but as of recently, he's shown a bit of progression that makes me sort of, excited to select him within the top 8. For me, he's got the physical frame and the skating attributes that I like from a center. But he's added some board play, which is really impressive. He's added some ability to cut to the inside and possession, when carrying off the rush. He's good on one-touch plays as well. For me, Cousins just shows a lot of the elements that you want from a play driving center in the top 6. And for me, it's just a matter of time before he does that with the Buffalo Sabres. He's already on the road to that. I don't think he edges out Tage Thompson just yet, but he could very well be the second line center for the Sabres, and having a 1-2 punch of Tage Thompson and Dylan Cousins would be something else in Buffalo. I mean, they've got a really good young core, and it's heading in the right direction. So, I was surprised with how well Cousins developed. I was a bit lower on him in his draft year, but he's shown some really good promise, and I've been impressed with him. After Dylan Cousins at 8, I've got the 7th overall pick, who was actually the 2nd overall pick in the original 2019 draft, and that's Kaapo Kakko of the New York Rangers. Kakko hasn't developed the way that people hoped he would. I mean, his production in his draft year in Finland was absolutely tremendous. It was one of the highest point per game rates for a draft year player in a men's league in Finland, in recent memory. So I was a bit surprised to see him sort of develop this poorly. I think the issue with him, he isn't dictating play as much as he should. He's sort of feeding off his line mates, and also the Rangers are kind of limiting his opportunities. He's not getting chances with, say, Mika Zibanejad or Chris Kreider or any of those top end players that they have. He's mostly been playing, bottom 6 minutes, but he hasn't earned more than that, and he hasn't impressed his coaches enough to be able to play in those top end roles. So it's also on him a bit, but I think Kakko is kind of limited at this point. I still think he's got a gear that he could reach in a year or two, which could make this look foolish. But for me, he's my 7th overall pick. Moving on from Kakko, I've got my 6th overall pick here, the 4th overall pick in the original 2019 draft of the Colorado Avalanche, and that's Bowen Byram. For me, Byram, the way that he played in May and in June in the playoffs for Colorado was absolutely tremendous, and I saw sort of the upside with Byron that would indicate to me that he could be flirting with that top 5 again in a redraft. There are obviously some players ahead of him that I value more in terms of skill set, but Byron is extremely dependable, extremely solid in his own end, and on top of that, he's got one of the best transition games among young defenders at the very least in the NHL. So definitely a no-brainer in this range. Then at 5th overall, I've got Matt Boldy, who was actually selected 12th by the Wild in 2019. Boldy, to me, has grown into a bona fide power forward with an insane playmaking touch. In many ways, he reminds me of Juraj Slafkovsky and what Slafkovsky could become. But Boldy has that added element of just being able to check his surroundings and create a mental map of his environment when he's in the offensive zone constantly. He seems always aware of what's going on around him. He doesn't seem out of place at all. He's just a very, very solid winger and could become a top line player for years to come for the Minnesota Wild. The 2 players I've got ahead of him were sort of in that range for me, and that kind of, flirting with top line and elite status type of players. So moving on from Boldy, my 4th overall pick from the Montreal Canadiens, Cole Caufield. He was selected 15th overall for the obvious reason of, being 5'7" and 160 pounds. And every level he's played at, he's been able to score. And that hasn't changed so far. There were questions when he started struggling under Dominique Ducharme in his rookie season in the NHL, but man, he's taken off, and he's taken off majorly. He's one of the leaders on Montreal in terms of play and in terms of production on a nightly basis. So really impressed with Caufield. Is my 4th pick. At 3rd overall, I've got Trevor Zegras of the Anaheim Ducks. He was selected 9th overall in 2019, and since then, he's only shown more and more sort of inklings of an elite player. He's always had that elite playmaking, that elite, offensive drive, but there were questions about his dependability in his own zone. It's still an issue, more or less, but he's so good offensively that it really compensates for it. And then at 2nd overall from the Detroit Red Wings, their 6th overall pick, who we discussed in detail last episode, Moritz Seider. For me, Seider is not only the best defenseman of this class, he's flirting with the top prospect from this very deep NHL draft class. Just tremendous defensively, tremendous physically. On top of that, he's one of the most shifty and elusive defensemen with the puck. For his size, especially, that's extremely impressive. So he's up there. And then finally, at first overall, the player who was actually drafted first overall in 2019 from the New Jersey Devils, Jack Hughes. Hughes to me is the best prospect in this class, not by a far margin, but by a decent enough margin that he's not going to get budged out of first overall unless another prospect just blows him out of the water in the next few years. He's just a tremendous puck carrier. He's one of the best, if not the best, transition centers in the NHL. Dependable in his own zone. He can find seams effortlessly. He's got a decent enough shot that he can be a threat from the half wall. I mean, he's got everything you're looking at from a center, from an elite center, and he's looking the part so far for the Devils, who are currently one of the best teams in the NHL, surprisingly. So that is the top 10. Now we're going to go ahead and talk WHL prospects with Derek Neumeier. We're going to start with the 2023 NHL draft classes forwards right after these messages. You just got to try Built Bar's new reimagined flavors. They've got cookie dough toppers, coconut brownie bars and toppers. They've got white chocolate peppermint granola, which is Built Bar's minty take on a granola bar. And they've got my personal favorite, which is candy cane brownie puffs. So they've got a candy cane flavored one, which I really like. This stuff tastes amazing, really. These are the most delicious protein products ever built. Get it? Built? See what never mind. 100% real chocolate, 17 grams of protein, shockingly low on sugar, and only 130 calories. Seriously, this is awesome stuff. It tastes great. It's perfect for an after workout energy refill. After a game of shinny, when you don't have the time to cook a full meal, it's like an on-the-go fine dining experience. So see for yourself. Get 15% off your order right now using the code LOCKEDON15 at built.com. Against that's LOCKEDON15 at built.com. Built, you've got to try this. All right, so I've got a very special guest for you here. He's the Assistant Director of Scouting and the Senior West Regional Scout at McKeen's Hockey. It's Derek Neumeier. Say hi to the people, Derek.
Hey, people. How's it going?
Perfect. So just talk a bit about what your role is with McKeen's and you know how it's been working for them so far.
Yeah, it's been going great. So for those who don't know, I was with FC Hockey for a few years before joining McKeen's this past summer. So, I'm still in some ways growing into my role, still kind of figuring out how everything works and getting to know the team. But I kind of paint myself as the right-hand man to Brock Otten, who is the director of scouting with McKeen's. He's kind of the head honcho. Everything kind of runs through him. And it's been great working with him so far. I've been learning a lot working with Brock. He is a wealth of knowledge in the scouting world, especially the OHL, where he is that's kind of his region.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to do my best just to stay on top primarily of the Western region. So I still do a lot of scouting as the assistant director of scouting because, I need to see the top guys from other regions. I've watched Leo Carlson, Matvey Michkov, Dalibor Dvorsky. I've seen him a few times. I'm trying to see all the top guys from other places as well. But my primary focus is the West and working with the other West scouts to make sure that we really have that region, fully under wraps.
Perfect. Yeah. So, this is the year to get into the dub, right? I think that, there's no other league so far that's had the wealth of prospects for the 2023 draft that the dub has shown. So let's get right into it. I just wanted to ask you first who your top three is so far in the WHL.
Well, the top guy is, kind of obvious. You could find people who don't even follow hockey who know that Connor Bedard is the top guy for this draft class. He has lived up to the hype. Even going back to last season, going back to the season before, this guy has been every bit as good as advertised, and he's made real notable progress this season as well. He's just lighting the lamp with ease. Defenses can't contain him, especially on the power play when he's got a little bit of room to operate. He's absolutely lethal. And I really have liked the progress I've seen out of his game so far this season.
Yeah.
Last year I had some question marks about the size and skating combination. There's so much importance put on spacing in hockey, the ability to create space as an offensive player. Look at someone like Connor McDavid. as the prime example, the way he's able to create space with his skating is unparalleled. Bedard, there were times last year where he'd get bottled up a little bit. It was easy enough for defenders to take away his space, but he's made real notable progress this season at, using his hands and his quickness and his awareness to open up room for himself. He's getting a lot more time and space to not just, unleash that lethal shot of his, but also to, work as a playmaker and make his teammates around him better. And he's been very dynamic about that. He's really added a step to his skating, and he's making his reads and decisions a lot quicker as well. And the results have been very, very impressive. And he's certainly making himself look even more projectable as a dynamic scoring threat in the NHL than he did before, which is kind of crazy to think about.
No, for sure. And what is he at? 17 points in his last 5 games?
I think something like that. Yeah, it's honestly hard to keep track because he's just all over the score sheet consistently, and he makes it look so easy too. It just seems like every time he touches the puck, there's that electricity in the air that something's going to happen with it. He's not afraid to shoot like at whim. He's willing to shoot from all over the ice, and he's good at it. He can score from distance.
Yep.
So yeah, it's easy enough to see why those points are coming for him so easily. And it's incredible because he's not exactly on a stacked team either. I mean, there are some good pieces around him in Regina, but that's not an all-star team by any means. So most of their offense, the vast majority of their offense is coming through his stick, which is, pretty crazy to see for a 17-year-old in that league.
For sure. And who are the two the sort of runner-ups to Connor Bedard in the WHL for you so far?
For a while, I would have said Brayden Yager was the clear-cut guy at number 2. And for me right now, he's still second, I would say. But that competition for third is getting real, real tight. So I'll talk about Yager first. And, there's just a lot to like about Yager. He's got a very projectable upside. He's a true center. He's playing as the number 1 center in Moose Jaw right now, taking tons of face-offs, playing in all situations. He's the top guy that defenses on other teams are trying to shut down, and he's still finding a way to, produce offense and be an impact player. Yeah. He's got a very high-end shot, not quite Bedard level, but it's right up there, maybe like an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 if you wanted to rate it. For sure. Really dangerous scorer, had a nice goal last night. He might not be the most dynamic player. I don't think his offensive vision and playmaking are quite high end. As a skater, he's not high end. His size and strength are kind of in the middle of the pack. He's not the biggest guy, but I really like his hockey sense and his versatility. He's another one of those guys that just kind of shows up every night, consistently puts up points. I really like the offensive upside and the general upside to him as a player. I think he could be one of those like 30 goal, 30 assist players in the NHL. Yep. Maybe not a true superstar, but I see maybe like a Bo Horvat kind of guy where the points are there consistently, but he's also able to touch the game in a lot of other areas. He could be a matchup center. He could be a penalty killer. He's a guy that you can rely on consistently shift over shift, which is really nice to see. So I like him a lot in that regard. But, there are some other players that are making a push for, that top 10 area from the West. So one of them is Zach Benson, who is, I still think he's a little bit of a wild card for this year, but I will say I like him a lot. But I just wonder how much I like him and how projectable it's going to be. So, but there's certainly a lot to like. He's a guy with exceptional hockey sense. Maybe even one of the smartest players in this entire draft class. Just the way he's able to read the play, the way he's able to find open space, the way he's able to think ahead of his opposition. It's all really, really high end and a really, really skilled player when the puck is on his stick. His puck control is incredible. His playmaking is incredible. His one-touch passing, his ability to catch and release, the way he's able just to manipulate the puck through space and, dig it out of skates is really, really high end. And sure. What I've loved about him maybe the most is just the pace that he plays at. He's not naturally the fastest guy, maybe not the most naturally athletic, but his motor just never stops. Shift over shift. He's always involved in the play. He's always churning his feet. He's always applying that pressure on defenses, which I love to see, right? Because if you take your foot off the gas, it just gives your opponents just a few extra seconds to regroup and reset and get back into position. But Benson doesn't give them that. He's always got his foot on the gas. For a shorter guy who's not the greatest skater, his ability to forecheck is great. His back checking is really good. He just comes at you all the time and can pickpocket you and apply pressure and force turnovers. There's a lot to like there.
For sure. So we'll continue our discussion on some of the WHL's top forwards for the 2023 draft. And we'll also talk about a couple forwards who have already been drafted and are still playing in the dub. We'll get right to it right after these messages. All right, so we're back with Derek Neumeier from McKeen's Hockey, the Assistant Director of Scouting and Senior West Regional Scout. Now, there's a couple other forwards I wanted to mention and have you sort of break down for me on this episode in terms of the 2023 eligibles. Then we'll head into some drafted prospects. First, I was talking to a couple scouts, and some are very, very high on Andrew Crystal. I've heard some say that he's the second best WHL draft eligible to come out of that league. So what's your thoughts on that?
I'm a big Crystal guy. He is absolutely on a tear right now. He is skyrocketing up, not just my personal list, but I think a lot of other people's as well. Because you can't deny the impact that he's having. He's certainly a guy who's pushing for that top 10 range. I don't have him ahead of Yager and Benson right now, but he is nipping at their heels, right? He's right there. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the season, I like Crystal more. I just want to do a little bit more digging on it because he doesn't quite have the same pedigree as those other two. But Andrew Crystal's great. I mean, he is just such a dynamic player. I talked about the motor and the pace that Zach Benson plays with. That's even better with Crystal. He's just so electric when he gets the puck on his stick. His feet move so quickly. He's able to weave in and out of traffic so well. He's got that incredible ability with the puck on his stick where you never quite know what he's going to do with it. He can really keep you guessing. The way he's able to find his teammates is really, really high end. That Kelowna team's not very deep. They don't have a whole ton of offensive firepower, but Crystal is generating a ton of offense, a ton of points, and it's all kind of going through his stick. He is the engine that is making the offense on that team move. And, as more and more teams are starting to zone in on him as the guy that they need to shut down because he's their most dangerous weapon. And it's not working. Like, he's still finding time and space to create. And he's still being able to beat opposing defenses just because he's out thinking them. He's out hustling them. And, he can thread pucks through the smallest of spaces. He's really good as a scorer in tight too. He's more of a playmaker. A bit of a pass first kind of guy, but he's a dangerous shooter when he gets a little bit of time and space. He's very accurate with that shot. And, I really like what he brings. He's great on the power play, but he might even be better at even strength. When he's got that, he's got his feet moving and he's going up the ice on the rush. I think that might be when he's at his very best, his ability to weave, to go east, west instead of just north, south. You do worry a little bit about the size and everything, but the compete is really there. He's not afraid to go into traffic. He's not afraid to fight for pucks along the wall. He's not always the most successful at it, but I absolutely love how willing he is to battle and try and win pucks back. And I think that's going to be something that really serves him well at the higher levels of hockey.
Moving on from Crystal, I just wanted to talk about two Prince George Cougars forwards who will be going in this draft in Cohen Zemer and Riley Hyde. Zemer right now leads Prince George in points. He's second in the dub. Riley Hyde is right behind him in points for Prince George. So who do you like better and why?
It's funny that you mentioned both of them together here because they complement each other really well. They become, a dynamic duo for Prince George this season, and they're top two forwards and they're generating the bulk of their offense. I like height more between the two, and I'll get into that as to why. So height, he's a center. He's a better skater than Zemer. I don't think he's necessarily a high end skater, but he's really quick. He's got a good motor. He's elusive. He's got good edge work and good balance. He's another pass first forward who doesn't have a ton of size out of the West, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. Those guys are certainly high value too. Really effective on the power play. That's absolutely where he does his best work. From the wall, he just sees the whole zone so well. He's really responsible with his puck. But what I've liked about him this year is he's improved his two-way game a lot. He's really, coming into his own as in the center position. He's looking a lot more comfortable playing in all kind of situations for Prince George. I like his defensive effort and his defensive details a lot better. I don't think he's ever going to be like a big time penalty killer or anything like that, but I do like that he's not going to be a defensive liability. I think he's going to be able to stay as a center at the NHL level and hold his own defensively, which is important for that position.
For sure.
I don't know if he's necessarily the best shooter. I'd say he's more of a pass first guy. He'll score the odd goal here or there, but he's definitely a playmaking center. But that works in Prince George because Ziemer is kind of the opposite. He's a true finisher, and obviously one of the better goal scorers in the WHL right now. He's got great hands and a great shot, and the two work in conjunction really, really well. He's able to manipulate the puck in the tightest of spaces just to kind of pull himself into better shooting positions, which is really nice. He's able to dig the puck out of his skates or, kind of maneuver it just a little bit to shoot it through an opponent's feet or underneath the stick. He's able to find just those tight little areas to get that shot through, which is huge. And it's great for him because his shot's a big-time weapon. It gets a lot of power and a lot of accuracy behind it. His one-timer is pretty good too, but I think his wrist shot is really that bread and butter. If you just give him just a step or two of too much space and a second to kind of get the puck exactly how he wants to release it, that's going top corner, that's going through the 5-hole. It's really impressive how he's grown as a shooter. He scored 30 goals last year as well, but like he's still getting better. He's still finding new ways to score goals, which is nice.
Yep.
I do wonder a little bit about the projection with Ziemer. I don't really like his skating. He's kind of a bit of a plodding skater. He doesn't get a lot of extension out of his stride. His agility is a little stiff. So I think that might hurt him a little bit at the NHL level. I still think he's a very projectable player overall. I see him maybe as like a second line winger, maybe top power player, second unit power play kind of guy. Someone who scores, 20 or 30 goals in the NHL pretty regularly, but maybe doesn't drive a line, maybe doesn't bring a lot in other areas of the ice. He doesn't play center. I don't think he's necessarily a good defensive player. I don't think he'll ever be a penalty killer, but that's okay, because he's good enough in the areas where he is good that he's going to be able to carve out a niche as one of those, true scoring forwards.
For sure. So just a quick word here on a couple more centers from the dub, and Samuel Honzak for the Vancouver Giants, and who I know is one of your personal favorites, Nate Danielson.
Yeah, so right now Honzak's been playing wing this season, but I do think he's got upside as a center. He's played center at different levels and then internationally and stuff like that. So I do think there is long-term upside for him as a center. And he's a guy who's really grown on me a lot this season. I watched him a little bit before he came into the dub. Didn't really see anything that really caught my eye. But watching him closely this year, he's growing on me a lot. He's got a lot of runway to his development, is the way I like to describe it. He's a big guy. He's a smooth mover. He's a good skater. He's good with his hands. His puck control is clean, and he's showing a lot of progress in the way he sees the ice and his decision making and the way he's adapting to the WHL. He's a guy who's made a lot of progress, and he's still getting better and better. I think he's going to be a guy that will draw a lot of attention from teams because I don't think he's close to scratching his ceiling yet. Yeah, he's still filling into his frame. He looks a little skinny out there at times. And, there's still a lot to learn about North American hockey coming, over from Slovakia. But I really like the upside there. There's just a lot of very projectable tools. And overall, when you kind of look at the complete package as a center who could, who skates well, who's a dual threat as both a shooter and a playmaker, who's able to transition the puck up the ice with it on his stick. I like him a lot. And I think his skating is going to improve a lot too. Danielson's a bit of a wild card for me. I just love the raw upside to him. He's just a really powerful skater. When he really gets going up the ice, he's got those long strides. He's a really athletic kid. He's able to really be dangerous moving north-south. He still needs to work on his ability to go east-west. He's more of like a straight line guy. But those guys are important too. If you can burst through the neutral zone, get behind defenses, and kind of gain zone entries that way. I think that's really important too.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like he's almost under the radar a little bit because of his environment. Because Brandon's not a great team this year. They really don't have a lot of offensive weapons. Everything kind of has to go through him.
Mm-hmm.
But I like how he's handling it. He's having to go up against the top defenses and other teams, and he's not scoring a whole ton, not as much as someone like Andrew Crystal is in a similar scenario. But he's doing a lot of damage too. He's being a guy who can generate a few offensive chances per game. But the real value of Danielson is not as a pure offensive guy. I really like the two-way upside with him. I think he's going to be a guy who could be a top penalty killer in the NHL. He could be a true matchup center, similar to how we're talking about with Yager, right? I see a guy who can touch the game in a lot of different ways. He's a right-handed shot, which adds that little bit of extra value as a center. So I think he's a guy who's going to still grow and learn a lot once he just fully gets a better understanding of how he can use his tools to generate offense.
For today, that's going to be it. What we're going to do is we're going to come back for a second episode tomorrow. We're going to have Derek back to discuss the 2023 NHL Drafts defenseman from the WHL. There's a lot of value there, and we'll talk through some drafted prospects as well. Now, Derek, just tell the people where they can find you in general.
Yeah, right now, for the time being anyways, on Twitter. Well, Twitter's still a thing. So my handle is at Derek_N_NHL. That's my main place to find me. You can find my work on the McKeen's website, which is we're starting to get our writing really ramped up. So, we'll have that, and we'll have our draft guide at the end of the year, as well as some other publications. So the main place right now is Twitter, but subscribe to McKeen's and, get access to all of our awesome draft content too.
Fantastic. Just tune in tomorrow. We'll have some more from Derek. And if you like what you're listening to right now, make sure to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, make sure to make us your first listen of the day. This has been Hadi Kalakesh with Derek Neumeier, and we will see you next time.